Chicago's Raven Heights Apartments appears in city records as a standard 12-story residential building, but the legend says at exactly 2:13 a.m., the building's mechanics change. The elevator reaches the top, then continues upward to a non-existent floor. This is floor 13. The rule is absolute. Anyone stepping out of the car never returns. The trap relies entirely on the curiosity of the residents. It is a physical impossibility that waits for someone to ignore the logic of the architecture and step into the dark. In October of 2026, journalist Ethan Carter arrived at the building to debunk the story. He brought a camera and a voice recorder, confident that the legend was nothing more than a local ghost story. The night security guard didn't share his confidence. He looked at Ethan's equipment with visible dread before handing over an old elevator key. He gave Ethan one specific instruction: if the doors open on the 13th floor, do not leave the elevator. Ethan took the key but ignored the warning. By treating the guard's fear as a superstition, he ensured he would be unprepared for the reality of the building. Ethan waited alone in the car. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the elevator groaned and began to ascend without any input from the control panel. It passed the 12th floor. Then a button labeled 13 flickered to life, glowing a dull red as the car came to a smooth stop. The doors opened to a hallway of rotting wood and flickering lights. Ethan, driven by the need for a headline, ignored the guard's warning and stepped out into the corridor. As his feet hit the carpet, the elevator doors slid shut. When he turned back, the car was gone. In its place was a solid, seamless wall. He reached for his phone, but the screen showed no signal. He checked his watch. The second hand had stopped moving entirely. The exit was gone, and his tools for measuring time and communication were useless. Ethan was no longer in the Chicago he knew. He was trapped in the hallway's own version of reality. Searching for a way out, Ethan followed the sound of distant laughter. At the end of the hall, a young girl in a white dress pointed him toward a single black door before vanishing into the shadows. Inside the room, hundreds of antique clocks lined the walls. Every pendulum was still, and every hand was frozen at 2:13. An elevator operator stood in the center of the room. He wore a dated uniform, and while he smiled at Ethan, his eyes were two voids of solid black. The man explained that floor 13 exists between life and death. It is a space where time does not flow, functioning as a purgatory for those who cross the threshold. According to the operator, the floor claims its residents to sustain itself. Every person who goes missing from the building eventually becomes a part of these walls. Suddenly, the silence broke. Every clock in the room began to tick at once. The walls began to pulse like a living chest, and the faces of the missing people began to push through the wallpaper, screaming for help. A shadow taller than the ceiling emerged from the corner. It had no eyes, only a wide, grinning mouth, and it began to move toward Ethan with heavy, rhythmic steps. Ethan bolted. He sprinted back through the decaying hallway, where the elevator reappeared, its doors standing open like a final chance at survival. He threw himself into the car as the shadow lunged. The doors hissed shut, and the elevator dropped with a violent force, shaking Ethan as it descended through the floors. The car finally leveled out at the lobby. As the bell dinged, Ethan collapsed against the railing, certain that he had managed to escape the building's grasp. Ethan stumbled out into a lobby covered in decades of dust and grime. He rushed outside into the Chicago night, but the city felt cold and unfamiliar. He walked into a nearby cafe and looked at a television mounted on the wall. The news scroll at the bottom of the screen displayed the date, October 31st, 2056. The realization was a physical blow. Ethan had entered the building in 2026. While he had only spent minutes on the 13th floor, 30 years had passed in the world outside. He ran back to the site of Raven Heights, but the building was gone, replaced by a vacant lot. Inside a glass display nearby, an old newspaper headline told the story: Journalist Ethan Carter missing. This is the finality of the 13th floor. Even for those who find their way back, the life they knew has been erased. The few minutes Ethan spent in the hallway cost him 3 decades of his life. A familiar chime echoed across the empty parking lot. The phantom elevator stood in the middle of the dirt, its doors sliding open to reveal the smiling operator. Invisible hands pulled Ethan back toward the car. He screamed as the rusted doors closed for the last time, and the elevator vanished into the ground. Floor 13 is a patient predator. If you find yourself in an elevator at 2:13 a.m., stay inside. Because once those doors close behind you, there is no way back to the world you left.